What exactly is this TV? I mean, frankly, I've never thought so deeply about a TV. I've never worked quite so hard on a TV review before, but why? What's so special about the Hisense UX that I've spent so much time working to figure out how I want to talk about it? Well, I figured it out, and I'm about to tell you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and let's just get right into it. The Hisense UX is more than just another TV on the market that's up for purchase consideration. It's the most ambitious TV Hisense has ever put into production. Spoiler alert, it is an actual record breaker. And by Hisense's own account, it is special. It is a limited edition TV, and apparently that's a big enough deal to Hisense that they printed it right on the box. But there's more to it than that for me. The Hisense UX has become a conversation starter. Whenever friends and co-workers have asked me what I think about it, I end up spending more time talking about what the Hisense UX represents than I do talking about what the Hisense UX actually does. And that's rare for me. I generally don't approach TV reviews from a philosophical point of view, partially because doing so doesn't exactly lead to riveting conversation at cocktail parties or YouTube videos, I guess. Anyway, the more I thought about it, the more I became certain that in order to evaluate or review this TV, I had to zoom out and talk about the bigger picture, no pun intended. So I'm gonna do that at the end of this review to kind of tie things together. So stick around, because whether you're wondering if you should buy this TV or whether it's better than this TV or that TV, or if you should maybe wait to see what Hisense does next at this point, all that should become clear by the end of this video. But to get to that end, we have to start at the beginning, which for me was the moment I had to roll this thing into the studio. Folks, the Hisense UX is a beast. The shipping weight of this thing is about 180 pounds, which I think makes it the heaviest 85-inch TV box that I've ever received. What really blew my mind was that the weight of the TV itself is about 124 pounds, which means that just the packaging weighs 60 pounds. I don't recall ever dealing with 60 pounds of packaging unless it was like a full-on wooden crate. But when I unboxed the UX, I understood why the packaging was so heavy. There's a lot of it, and it's all in service of protecting the TV because the TV is so heavy. But that packaging is gonna do its job protecting the TV. So kudos to Hisense for choosing not to skimp or cut corners with the packaging. I remember hoping that theme would continue as I dug deeper, and I'm pleased to report that it did. With that said, here comes my first complaint. The unboxing and assembly instructions are not great. I followed them as exactly as I could, even though I normally would just go my own way for putting a TV together. I really wish I had just gone my own way, because the process that you see here involves two people. One person holding the TV up on two pieces of foam while the other person installs the legs. Now, don't misunderstand me here. You absolutely need at least two people on hand to get this TV set up, but not for this style of assembly that Hisense recommends with its literature. I don't see any reason I couldn't have just carefully laid this TV down on its face with the ample padding provided to install the feet, but I digress. I got the feet installed in the outer position. You can position them inward so the TV will sit on a smaller media stand. That's true for all Hisense TVs, heaving it up onto our BDI media cabinet and removing some plastic film. Now, as I have it assembled here, the UX has a 68-inch wide stance. You could move the feet in though and fit it on a stand no less than 19 inches wide. I cannot comment on how stable the TV would be with the feet positioned inward because I didn't try it, but the feet are themselves rock solid and they bolt in extremely securely, so I'm optimistic it would be fine. Now let's take a step back and look at what we're working with here. There are speakers lining the left and right rails of the TV, and they kind of peek out from the edges because they're not flush with the bezels. Continuing with the audio system, I want to point out that there are 2 small bass transducers in the back of the TV, and there are 2 up-firing speakers that shoot sound up from the top of the TV's border. I'll talk about the sound quality at some length in a moment, but for now I want to acknowledge that I've heard from some folks that they do not care for the look of the Hisense UX. I even heard from one viewer who bought the TV and returned it a couple weeks later because they couldn't stand the look. Here's my comment on that. If you want a TV to sound good, I mean actually good, it's gonna involve design that doesn't rely on 2 speakers hidden at the bottom and firing down toward the floor. That, or the screen itself has to be a speaker, and that kind of approach can't be done with an LCD panel. So, understand that audio is part of the premium experience with this TV, and that audio necessarily alters the look of the TV, so weigh your priorities accordingly. One last comment on build quality. This TV is built like a tank, and I'm here for it. A big part of the conversation we're having right now is around where your money goes if you buy this TV, and so far, we have build quality and we have audio system, and we'll continue that tally as we move along here. Google TV setup was par for the course. This particular TV took a little longer to install apps and get me to the home screen than either the U8K or U7K. Not sure why, it just did. I don't mind though, because Google TV is so easy to work with on the long term that it can take its sweet time during initial setup for all I care. For picture settings, I chose Filmmaker mode for both SDR and HDR, and I chose Dolby Vision Custom for Dolby Vision content, being careful to turn off the motion smoothing that is on by default in Dolby Vision Custom. It's already off in Filmmaker mode for SDR and HDR. One other very important setting adjustment that you need to know about. If you want full control of the brightness/backlight settings, you have to go into the backlight menu and turn off the automatic light sensor setting. Even if you have apply to all sources selected, you have to do it while watching SDR, HDR, and Dolby Vision content. And you'll want to double check it in each of the built-in apps that you use, as well as the HDMI inputs, just to be sure. I also had to make sure that I had the backlight and brightness settings balanced out, because it's rare to see both of those in a TV these days. Normally, the backlight setting functions as the brightness setting, essentially, or the brightness setting effectively changes the backlight output. But in the case of the UX here, the 2 are separated, so don't overlook that if you want to get the picture just right for you. With all of that work done, I got to measuring, and you know what that means. It's numbers for Nit Nerds time. Now, as always, if you're not interested in the deep data and just want to know what the picture quality experience is like, you can skip this section entirely using the time code in the description below this video. But for those of you who like to nerd out on nits and numbers, here we go. First off, if you weren't already aware, Hisense promises up to 2,500 nits of peak brightness right on the box, and claims the TV's LED backlight system is broken down into 5,000 individual zones, with advanced processing promising precise control of those 5,000 zones. I do hope for that precise control, because 5,000 zones is a lot to control, and to exert that control well, it's going to need accurate and quick processing. Okay, shall we talk peak brightness numbers? Now, some of you are about to get mad at me because it could be argued that I buried the lead here, but are you ready for this? In SDR, with the backlight set to max, the peak brightness clocked in at just over 3,000 nits. That was for a 10% window, which, by the way, is a massive window on an 85-inch TV. But that's nothing. In HDR, 10% window again, I got 4,023 nits. And I got just shy of 4,000 nits sustained for a full 30 seconds, and full screen brightness, the TV put out 1,300 nits. Folks, that full screen brightness is as high as some of the best TV's peak highlight brightness. That is absolutely insane, and definitely way, way higher than the claimed 2,500 nits that's on the box. I'm impressed. Now, even if Hisense UX TVs that go out into the wild don't go quite that high, I suspect some could, but that means that 3,000 nits is kind of like the baseline expectation. And remember, folks, This is in filmmaker mode with warm color temperature. So for cooler white points, it's gonna seem even brighter. Just insane. Anyway, this is now the brightest TV I've ever tested. I gotta wonder how long it's gonna actually hold that record. But next, let's talk about color. Actually, we'll start with the white point. In SDR, the white point was below a delta E of 3. In HDR, it bumped up to a delta E of 4. Again, these are just out-of-box filmmaker mode, right? Now that's the 2-point white balance. As we look at 20-point grayscale, the out-of-box performance is great in the lower luminance half, and then start showing errors in the brighter half. Not surprisingly, blue needs to be knocked down a little bit in order to meet the D65 white point standard. It's also very important to point out that this TV over brightens everything according to standard. As you can see here, it tracks well above the EOTF curve almost the entire way, save in the blacks. Now remember, Samsung got roasted for this, so I don't think that we can give Hisense a pass considering how expensive this TV is. This could be fixed with an update though, I'd imagine, so let's see if Hisense is into that. Okay, now let's talk color. It's kind of the same story. We see some colors that are quite accurate and others that are not. Average delta E is just over 4 with the worst errors around 9, though there are a few of those. If this was the Hisense U8K, I'd be okay with those numbers, but we're talking about super premium pricing tier here, and I think the standards need to be higher. I'd like to see better out-of-box color accuracy than this. Still, for most viewers, this isn't gonna trigger anyone. The colors will look normal enough to most folks. Now let's talk about the local dimming. Here is where I think I'm the most impressed. That kind of brightness power with dimming control this good is not something I can recall having seen before. I definitely did not expect it from this TV. I'm blown away that the backlight control is so tight on this TV that bright objects don't come with more of a halo around them. And then the backlight system is quick too. It is not at all sluggish, and I was definitely worried about that. So the 16-bit backlight processing, or whatever it is Hisense is calling it, it works, and it works a treat. Okay, so for those of you who skipped the Nit Nerds section and are just rejoining us, I've always said that measurements not only don't tell the whole story, they can often be misleading if taken out of context. And though that is still true here to some degree, I do feel like Hisense's promise of high brightness and precise backlight control does set up reasonable expectations of a high quality experience. This is definitely the brightest TV I've ever tested. It is shattering records. It's got fantastic backlight control, minimal blooming. The colors are not exactly dead on accurate. They could be a little bit better, but overall, very impressive. The Hisense UX can look very stunning, but it can also look downright atrocious. The secret is in the picture preset that you use, or your willingness to hire a calibrator to help get you the picture that you want. Now, if the data that TV brands share with me is to be believed, most folks leave their TVs in whatever picture mode it's set to at the factory. In this case, that's going to be the energy saving mode. Now, in a dim room in energy saving mode with the auto light sensor turned on, the TV will dim in lower light environments, and in those cases, the picture is not atrocious. However, in a bright environment, or if you turn off the auto light sensor and turn up the backlight, the colors are, well, they look like they're coming from commercial signage. It's like rolling down the Vegas Strip at night. It is blindingly bright, garish, almost neon. I personally think it's gross. In standard mode, again, without the light sensor on, the colors are woefully just out of whack. And vivid mode is just, okay, I'll stop short of using the word grotesque, but they're not okay. And before you dismiss this as some videophile purist's take, we're trying to show you here, but the TV is just too bright for our camera to handle, so you're gonna have to trust me. It's just out of control. It will wear you out over time. That's the bad news. The good news is that theater day, theater night, and filmmaker mode all look pretty great right out of the box. You just have to take the time and go into those settings to pick those modes. And I'm hopeful, considering this is such an expensive TV, that the folks who buy this TV will be inclined to do that work. The great news is that with the right settings, the Hisense UX is just absolutely stunning. This is by far the finest TV that Hisense has ever made, at least as far as I'm aware. Its brightness power is immense. The local dimming control is excellent. The color accuracy is within acceptable tolerances for most viewers. And perhaps the best part of all, the off-angle viewing experience is outstanding. Like, I'm just really impressed by how the picture maintains its saturation and contrast, even at pretty extreme angles. That right there, to me, is worth a lot. So that's brightness, contrast, and color. I'd put them all at either the very good to great tier. The next most important thing to me is motion resolution, and this is an area in which Hisense still has some room to improve. By no means is the motion bad, okay? This kind of motion resolution is perfectly acceptable in, say, the Hisense U8K or the TCL QM8 or the Samsung QN85. But this TV is considerably more expensive than those models. It's punching up into the top tier of TVs in terms of price, which means it has to compete with the likes of the Sony X95L when it comes to motion, and it falls a bit short of that level of performance. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it is an area in which Hisense can stand to improve a bit looking forward. And that'll just bring more value to the brand overall if they can get a little closer in the motion processing front. I was also hoping for slightly better picture processing overall. And I'm talking about really fine granular stuff here, like how it cleans up lower bit depth content, like what you often stream on YouTube or Hulu or Sling TV. I've seen processing from Sony that makes Sling TV look downright fantastic. The UX can't quite do that. Again, in that respect, it looks a lot like the U8K, with the U8K's price level is just fine. Outstanding, in fact. But again, at this price tier, it needs to be a little bit better to compete with the premium brands that it's going after. I mean, for those of you who follow TVs, the UX to me is like a big U8K with a super advanced backlight system. It just punches up the brightness and the contrast, and by extension, the color volume. And where the backlight processing is concerned, it is definitely up to snuff. But the rest of the picture processing feels like it's just kind of ported over from the U8K. And I think what folks are gonna want on the longer term is to see a more premium TV performance across the board. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I still need to talk about the sound quality. I gotta hand it to Hisense for making one of the best sounding TVs that I've ever heard. I mean, for the first time in like forever, I don't have a problem saying that this TV has a built-in subwoofer. It's like a subwoofer. The bass this TV puts out is rather marvelous for a built-in speaker system. The bass is about the same in volume and depth as the inexpensive subwoofer that comes with a soundbar. The upfiring speakers definitely add dimension and height to the sound presentation in a way that doesn't sound faked, and I appreciate that a great deal. Dialogue clarity is fantastic. It's just a big sounding TV. I mean, I'd like to do a little voicing on it to get the fidelity a little ironed out, but I'm pressing myself to think of a TV that sounds anywhere near as big as the UX, and I can't think of one. The Sony A95K and A95L OLED TVs have better fidelity. They just sound a little more refined, but in terms of volume, presence, and impact, it's not even close. The UX blows the QD OLEDs right out of the water. I just have one little nitpicking complaint, and that's that the volume control is, well, it's out of control. I appreciate that when I press the volume button, the volume doesn't move at a snail's pace like it does with so many other TVs, but it just moves way too fast. And that's due in part to the other issue, which is that the difference between 0 and 12 on this volume dial, which goes much higher by the way, the difference in loudness in just 11 clicks is monumental, with 1 being barely audible and 12 being on the verge of too loud for most folks. And if you venture much past 12, you're definitely pissing off the neighbors. I'd say keep the speed of the adjustment, but make the volume differences between each increment a little smaller so that, say, maybe 24 was about the same loudness as 12 is now. Anyway, it's just way too easy to turn the TV up way too loud, and I'd like to see that fixed. So now it's time to put all of this into perspective. I've tested the best budget and high value TVs this year, from the Hisense U7K to the U8K to the TCL Q7 and the QM8. I've tested the Sony X90L, X93L, and X95L. I've tested the Samsung QN95C and the S95C, the LG G3 and the C3, and most recently the Sony A95L. I've gotten a pretty broad look at the quality, screen size, and price situation. So where does the Hisense UX sit in all of that? Well, first, let me just say that I admire Hisense for making the UX. I think this took some guts. This TV is a gamble for Hisense. I think the UX is expensive to make. I know it's expensive to ship. And frankly, I don't think there's a ton of margin built into this TV. For certain, Hisense is not getting rich off the UX, if only because they aren't making very many of them. Hisense is still building its brand recognition and brand trust in the United States. It is not known as a super premium brand. It is not known as being capable of going against the top tier TVs from Sony, LG, and Samsung. And it is for sure not known for making a TV anywhere near this expensive. In North America, at least, this is unfamiliar territory for both Hisense and its customers. But Hisense went and did it anyway. And I just have to admire that. When it comes to the super premium TV space, you have to start somewhere. And I love that Hisense just jumped in with both feet. It feels like they threw everything they had into this TV, and in the process, threw itself on the mercy of the court. When you say this is the best that we can do, well, you're a little bit vulnerable in that situation. Well, as one of the judges on the panel of public opinion, I congratulate Hisense. I think they made a superb TV. The UX does not blow the competition out of the water, neither in terms of price nor performance. This is not an OLED versus LED conversation. OLED is gonna win every time, and that's just a separate video. This is not a value discussion. I think the TCL QM8 gets a little too close to this TV for half the price at the same size. Though there is no denying that the Hisense UX is superior to the QM8, it just costs double. And if I were to stack the Sony X95L next to the Hisense UX, despite the radical difference in specs, for the same money, I reckon I would probably pick the X95L, but not by a huge margin. That's hard to say when I know Hisense has a lot riding on this TV, and some folks are gonna cherry pick that line out of this review. But please don't, because folks, the fact that Hisense is right up there with the best TVs from the best brands, think of the message that sends. Hisense is saying, we're coming for you, Sony. We're knocking down your back door, Samsung. We've already got you on the LED TV game, LG. And hey, TCL, you're gonna have to pick up the pace if you wanna keep up with us. That's huge. That's what the UX is. The Hisense UX is the TV that puts every other brand on notice. And 2024, especially 2025, are gonna look very different because of that. And that, my friends, is how you move markets. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What do you think of the Hisense UX? Leave me a comment down below if you appreciate the big picture talk, or, let me know if you don't. Please consider liking and subscribing to help support the channel. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.